Hello and welcome to StudyIQ English, your one-stop destination for succeeding in the civil services exam, in the UPSC civil services exam. A very good morning. Welcome to today's Hindu news analysis, where we shall be analyzing the exam relevant news articles from the perspective of both UPSC prelims as well as mains. Now, this is the Hindu newspaper New Delhi edition. Okay, and let me quickly show you how many articles have we taken for today's analysis. As you can see on your screen, there are two articles that I have picked up from the editorial page. As we know, the editorial page articles are always more complex and detailed. And today, we have picked them up from the page number 8. They talk about one, a huge social economic problem that impacts the life of poor Indian laborers, poor Indian workers in the informal sector. The second article is once again a retake on the ongoing US-India tariff war. Now, these are the two articles we shall analyze with great detail. Apart from that, as you can see, we also have certain articles that are rather short and crisp, and these are crucial from the prelims perspective. And these articles range from how Prime Minister Shri Modi is soon to be visiting China for attending the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. And then, of course, we talk about the rising price of fuel, rather the LPG rising price in India. What has the government done to help the people below poverty line? And then we talk about a very interesting scheme that the government is now thinking about to change the landscape of higher education in India. So this is education reforms. And the last article is about the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. We are seeing some complaints and some issues which people are perceiving with this new Indian law code. So with these articles, let's go in with the very first one. Keep me posted with all your interesting comments in the live chat. And should you want to talk about something, should you want to ask a question, once again, you can feel free to do so. A very good morning there, Rishi. Great to hear from you. And now let's get going with today's important articles. So now the very first article of the day, as you can see on the screen, comes from page 8. If we do a quick topic mapping, we can say that yes, it corresponds with your GS paper 1 and 2 in terms of international relations, polity and governance. Then of course GS paper 3 as well, because we are talking about tariffs. We are talking about economic growth. We are talking about trade, the bilateral trade between India and the US. Okay. So let's get going now and let's see quickly what the article has to say. Now, the India-US tariff war is nothing new because we know that since the last few weeks, every day headlines are talking about how suddenly the US government led by Donald Trump had decided to impose a high 25% tariff on Indian exports to the US. This was already a very high rate of tariff, but rather than negotiating, rather than having a dialogue-based approach, the US government again yesterday chose to once again increase the broader tariff limit to one more 25%. So today we confront a situation where Indian exports going to the US will have to face a very high tariff rate of 50%, and this shall be very soon implemented. Only a gap of 21 days we have been given for these tariffs to be implemented. So we ask a question that if US has imposed now a total tariff rate of 50%, and from 7th August onwards we have no choice but to go with this tariff regime, how has it impacted India? Yesterday we saw that Indian export segment, especially talking about the steel, aluminum industry, machine supplies, pharmaceuticals, diamond, gold, and other precious gems. These are certain segments which have to be very, very badly impacted. Now, a very important question here is, why did the government choose to slap us with another 25% over the existing earlier first phase of 25%? So we all know it comes as a retaliation that the US has been expressing because India has had a continued import of oil and gas from Russia. In fact, yesterday, a very shocking and disturbing dialogue came from the US. US government has blamed India of being insensitive towards the deaths and the killings of Ukrainian people in the Russia-Ukraine war. Why such a harsh political diplomatic comment? This comment is almost like an anger that the US is expressing over India because US does not want India to have any kind of oil gas deal with Russia. Obviously, this is something Indian Ministry of External Affairs has also raised objection to. But this is the reason given by the US for this additional 25% punishment that US has imposed on us. And absolutely, as you are saying, it seems like US has made tariff the new normal. This is again like an economic war that we are fighting. Agreed, it is against the WTO principles of fair and transparent reciprocal tariff regime. But this time it is looking more like an economic imperialism rather than a pure economic consideration. Having said that, why India will be so poorly impacted in immediate few months to come within the next financial year if the tariffs are not reduced immediately? One major problem comes from the fact that India has today a merchandise trade surplus with the US, and I'm talking about the financial year 2024 to 25. This trade surplus, which means our exports are giving us excellent earnings. Our exports to the US are making India earn a very high revenue. No wonder we have an export benefit, an export surplus that mounts to about dollars 41.18 billion. Now, this is a huge amount for our economy. But with this tariff regime, we know that US has hit not only Indian exports but also Indian imports in a major way. Now, India is left in a huge dilemma. As I said yesterday, if India chooses to create a reciprocal tariff barrier, for example, by reciprocal tariff barrier, we mean that India also imposes a very high amount of tariff, a very high percentage of tariff on imported goods coming from US into our economy. Then this becomes the reciprocal, mutual bilateral tariff regime. But in that case also, Indian economy will have to pay a price because then the cost of all the imported goods and services from the US will increase multifold. Now let's remember India still depends on US imports for certain sectors like AI chips, semiconductor, electronic goods, of course, certain kind of generic medication, especially ones which deal with critical diseases like cancer and HIV. In that case, too much reciprocal tariff will also be axing our own foot. And at the same time, if India decides to give in to the pressure, to bow down in front of US and stop its import of gas and oil from Russia, then again, how will we provide for the fuel needs of our economy? Should we start importing more gas and oil from US itself or other destinations? Will that be not too much expensive for India again? So both ways, whether going with reciprocal tariff retaliation or whether choosing to accept the existing 50% limit on our exports, Indian economy will definitely have to face certain problems. Yesterday, we saw in the newspaper how the exporters, Indian exporters and manufacturers are seeing a very grim future. They are facing a prospect of all the orders that shall be cancelled by the US companies and consumers because nobody will invest in Indian products when their cost becomes double in the US market. So these are certain things the article is talking about. Now, the article also says that today, such unilateral, one-sided actions taken by the US are absolutely against the WTO agenda of fair, transparent, and a just fair trade. So this is one thing. US has once again contradicted the norms made by international organizations like WTO. So, of course, there will be long term and short term impacts both. Talking about immediate fallouts, immediate impacts, one thing is that Indian exports to the US will go down by a massive 25%. That's a huge fall in our revenues from exports. Second thing is that when the export demand for Indian product falls down, what about the labor intensive sectors? Now, there are certain segments of our economy like textile, apparel, say, for example, the assembly of white goods, electronic goods, or for that matter, toy making industry. Such industries, even including jewelry and gem industry, these depend on too much manual labor. So many informal sector laborers from India are employed in such domestic industries. But when the demand for goods goes down, don't we see a massive prospect of structural unemployment happening? Don't we see a massive prospect of cyclical unemployment happening? Cyclical unemployment? When? Because of market ups and downs. Businesses close and people lose their job. Something similar to what had happened during the COVID pandemic. Okay. Similarly, structural unemployment. So many semi skilled and unskilled laborers who work in these labor intensive sectors will not be able to find jobs in other sectors, and hence our unemployment statistics will rise tremendously. Just 1 week back, another article from the Hindu had already said that despite the claim of our becoming the third largest economy very soon now, the unemployment data still reveals that there is a massive structural, hidden, and cyclical unemployment in urban India, and a considerable amount of disguised and seasonal unemployment that still exists, that is there in the Indian agriculture sector. So we will be caught up in a vicious cycle of unemployment. Another problem, as I said, if India agrees to what US says, let's see, we go very diplomatic and we say, fine, let's not import any oil and gas from Russia. Let's diversify our oil imports. Let's start importing certain oil and gas from certain barrels from US itself. But then that comes at a very heavy price. Crude oil from the US will mean India will have to pay much more than what it is paying to Russia right now for the same amount of oil. So again, it is an economic loss for us. And as I said, because India has had to do some kind of reciprocal tariff, the current account deficit is also going up. For example, if it is 0.6% now, it will shoot up to 1.15%. But what exactly is the current account deficit? When I say this, I mean to say that current account deficit shows a situation in which a country is importing more than what it is exporting. It means that the country is having some kind of a trade loss, some kind of a trade imbalance, because our export income is lesser than our import expenditure. So this is going to happen soon if the tariff structures are not changed. Having said that, India presently holds a current account deficit that is coming out to be almost about dollars 13.5 billion. This corresponds to literally 1.3% of our total gross domestic product. Now, if this is the situation right now, by the time we reach the last quarter of this financial year, with this tariff rate, it is only going to jump up higher. Having said that, already we are seeing some negative trends. The stock markets are falling. Apart from that, the rupee versus dollar ratio is also negative. Now, Indian rupee seems to have already been experiencing some degradation. It is already depreciating from about 86 rupees something per dollar to now 87.5 rupee per dollar, which again means anyways our US imports will be more expensive to us now. So having said that, plus it also impacts our foreign exchange remittance, the income earned by Indian residents in the US. The amount of that also goes down. Ultimately, that also impacts our national income. So these are the typical side effects said by this article that India will have to face in the long term, short term, immediately now if the tariff structure doesn't change. So then in that case, do we have a solution? The article says, can we do something to mitigate, to solve this problem, to control and to force US in a very diplomatic way to revise its tariff structure? There are two, three solutions. One solution is once more a proper negotiation with the US. Earlier as well, when India had not endorsed the bill which was criticizing Russia for attacking Ukraine, US and many other countries, including the European Union nations, were unhappy with India. But then later, India clarified that this has nothing to do with India supporting any kind of war, either the Russia Ukraine war or any action taken by US backed Israel in the West Asia. Sri Ravi Shankar, Sri Jay Shankar clearly said that it is purely India's multilateral policy. This is a foreign diplomacy, that we will not be aligned to one particular nation or its agenda. We will see our economic, our geopolitical benefit. Something similar India can do now. Maybe a smarter convincing, a more stronger negotiation with the US could possibly give a possibility, a chance that the tariff structure can be negotiated. Second thing is that now, in case US does not agree at all, because anyway, the deadlines are almost nearing now. Both these tariff structures will soon roll out. So the choice that India has is to diversify its market rather than seeing US as the largest trading partner, as the largest market for Indian goods and services. India could definitely explore other markets, including, say, UAE, including, say, other nations of West Asia, where the demand for Indian goods and services is very high, including textile, gems, jewelry, pharmaceutical, and steel, aluminium, iron components. Similarly, Southeast Asian market is also something India could explore. So we can think of expanding trade with European Union nations, with United Kingdom, say with countries of South America. Maybe more stronger free trade agreements. Like recently, the Indian government signed the India-UK free trade agreement. That was a great step. Similarly, having other trading partners could give us some protection from this fear of current account deficit, negative trade balance with the US in future. Another thing is that India could do some change in its domestic economic policy. Now we know that all the sectors today which were exporting goods to the US, which are now threatened. I spoke about them already. Textile, gems and jewelry, pharmaceuticals, and various kind of machinery, electronics. If they are facing the fear of falling exports and falling demand, then maybe we can offer some help by reducing the import duties on raw materials that are used by these export oriented segments. So their cost of production declines. Maybe it gives them some temporary relief right now. So just to reduce the cost push impact on these export sectors, we could think of subsidizing their raw materials and their input cost. So these are certain initiatives that can be thought about presently, and then we are yet to see how exactly the tariff deal works out. Now, with this, let's proceed with the second article of the day. This is also page number 8, the editorial page. Why the article is extremely important is because, from the perspective of your GS paper 2, social justice, where we talk about providing social, economic benefit, welfare to the members of the vulnerable communities in India. The informal sector employees working in factories, working in unregistered companies become a critical component here. Okay, what is Indian profits? So we are exactly considering that. As of now, as I told you, India has an extremely positive trade surplus with the US. So I'm addressing the question asked by somebody from the previous article. As of now, we are experiencing a positive trade surplus. But with this tariff regime, the fear of that profit decreasing on a monthly basis is just rising. So that's why we are talking about negotiating with the US to find a solution to the problem. I hope you understood, sir, there. Okay. Now with this article, as I was talking about, This again is an editorial page article. Topic mapping says it comes under welfare schemes from GS paper 2, welfare schemes for the vulnerable poor segments of Indian society. Informal sector laborers are the key victims here, okay? The informal sector laborers. Yesterday I told you, and day before yesterday also, I told you there is a word that we use for all the employees of the informal, unregistered, unorganized sector. Which kind of employees are these called? Can anybody remind me? Do you remember? I had mentioned that all of these are the ghost employees. Why? Because they are invisible. They are all victims of vulnerable unemployment. They do not have any proof of their work, no contract, no written proof of salary on paper, because this informal segment is outside the regulation of Indian government. Although it provides massive contribution to the Indian GDP. In fact, majority of our GDP income comes from the informal sector. But in reality, they are not recognized on paper by the government. So their contribution is invisible. So what name should we give to them? They are the ghost invisible employees. The article talks exactly about these people. So it is GS paper 2 social justice. Yes, of course, it is GS paper 3 as well, because we here are also talking about labor laws. Okay, we are talking about labor laws. Here we are talking about the economy topic, and under the economy topic specifically we are talking about income inequality. Okay, so a question comes my way. Absolutely, that's well commented, Rishi. Yes, although slightly outside the purview of the article that we discussed, but absolutely that's a valid point you have made about the profits. Okay, so now talking about this article in question, this article therefore talks about the problem of industrial accidents. Now, all of us remember from history the tragic Bhopal gas accident that had happened. We know that even today, despite government saying that the government has given enough compensation and relief to the people who were impacted by the gas leakage in Bhopal factory, long back, we are talking about 1984 to 85 period. Even today, the inhabitants of that place complain of various kind of physical, mental disabilities. It has had a very intra-generational impact on the people of that region. So anytime there is a nuclear radiation leakage, anytime there is a chemical gas leakage in any factory or any pharmaceutical, unit, or in case there is any other kind of episode like fire, it is actually the workers who are employed there who become the worst affected. So, this article is trying to explore that why, in the last 5 years, just in the period 2020 to 2025 in India, we have seen 6,500 workers losing their life to factory accidents. These accidents usually happen not only in manufacturing factories but also in construction sites, various kind of mines, cracker making industries, bangle making industries, and any other occupation that includes some kind of a danger, some kind of a hazard. Now, this data, 6,500 people losing their lives in just 5 years, naturally does not tell us the real picture. Like yesterday, one of the students commented that data always minimizes the picture of the real loss, which is much higher. And this data given by the Labour Ministry, plus investigations done under the Right to Information Act, it says these many people have died. Now, unfortunately, the article also says that if we just observe the trend of the number of accidents that happen in India due to industrial fires or chemical leakages, it comes out to be 3 people dying each day during a peace time, which means whenever there is no war in a country, when there is peace period, In that context, it is almost like saying that three people are losing their lives every day to industrial or factory based accidents. Majority number of these are coming from states like Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu. And it also means that in both these states, as per the article, there are about 200 deaths, fatalities in major industrial accidents in just last 10 years. Isn't that huge? That's a massive number of casualty. Just few months before, even in Ghaziabad, in the Delhi NCR region, one cracker making fire, the cracker making industry, it was a small factory, just caught up fire, and so many people were literally burnt to death. So these are very common things in India, we all know. The problem is that all these accidents are being reported from either, as I said, the informal manufacturing units or ones that are completely unregistered. Sadly, some of the MSME, the medium to small scale enterprises, are also coming under its ambit. In all these sectors, we see these accidents happening very often. Now, in reality, if we try to see why do these accidents happen, the biggest question this article asks is that are these accidents unavoidable? Yes, the Bhopal gas tragedy, absolutely, Vansh, that's what I said. Yes. Can you tell me which gas was responsible, which chemical gas was responsible for the tragedy in Bhopal episode? Okay, that's just a question I'm shooting at you. Now, these, as per the article, are avoidable or are they unavoidable? All these accidents, whom should we blame? The writer of that article says that in India, it's very common to say it has happened because it is just predestined to happen. We have a very fatalistic approach. Sometimes we have a very abstract reason behind problems. We say it was God's will, so it happened. But this is almost like passing the buck of government negligence, community negligence to destiny. Because in reality, all these accidents, as per this article, were, yes, they were avoidable. And still they happen. Excellent ones. Yes, yes, absolutely. It was methyl isonate. Absolutely. Well said there. Now, these were completely avoidable and still they happened. So, what exactly is going on? As per the article, a study was done back in 2022 by the Center for Science and Environment. It said that India has almost 130 major chemical accidents in just 30-month period after 2020, the peak COVID time. Yes, the company was Union Carbide Limited. Absolutely. Very well said. Thank you for your comment. And 218 people and 300 plus people got injured just in the period following 2010 until now. So that's the last 5 years again. Most of these, as I said, are industries that operate behind the government's back. The government doesn't even know they exist. Or even if the government has issued them some license, the government has not followed up whether these industries who are doing dangerous occupations, which includes the use of chemicals, the use of fire, the use of explosive material, are they taking routine protocols, safety protocols or not? Are the labor laws being strictly implemented that the government has actually not monitored properly? No wonder there is a high rate of accident in mining belts, in manufacturing industries located in the states of Gujarat, Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, as well as Uttar Pradesh. Okay. Now, with this, the article says that in Gujarat, unfortunately, about 60 major industrial plus gas leakage or leaks happened since 2021. So you imagine since 2021 to now, that's barely 4 years period, 60 gas leakages and industrial fires have erupted. That's a massive number for any country. Whereas in countries like South Korea, Japan, Australia, it is something that's considered as manslaughter. For example, in South Korea and Singapore, any such industrial tragedy comes under the manslaughter law. And the senior executives of the company, of the factory, are absolutely arrested. They are supposed to pay compensation and they are sometimes imprisoned. They are held responsible for that. But in India, that kind of mechanism doesn't exist. The article says in India, we keep rotating in the same cycle. Tragedy happens, there is a protest by the victims and their families and NGOs and civil society. After that, compensation is taken care of. Some rehabilitation happens, some is ignored. A committee is created that takes years to investigate on the accident, and eventually everything falls silent until another accident takes place. You see, it is a vicious cycle. It's a chronic problem, and nothing much has been done to ensure that these do not happen in future. Why such a situation? When other countries have strict laws, the biggest and the most emotional appeal that this article has made, the writer has made, is that writer says if similar amount of heavy accidents start taking place in modern special economic zones where most multinational headquarters are located, or in the industrial training centers, or in the IT parks in India, even then will the people react in the same way? Will the government still choose to be silent? No. Just because these are the informal sector poor laborers doesn't mean their casualties are something that people just ignore. So, therefore, were these avoidable? Yes, unfortunately, all these accidents were avoidable. Why were they happening? Article says most of these factories did not even take the no objection certificate from the government, from the fire department to start their operation. Which means, for example, the fire making and the bangle making sectors and the mining sectors, which include heavy use of fire, explosives, they have not taken any no objection certificate. No approval has been taken from the fire department. Therefore, no protocols were being followed. Very unfortunately, there was no system there to control the fire even if it breaks out. So, firefighting systems were either not there or they were not functioning properly. Sometimes these factories did not even have the work permit. The work permit expired years before. They never bothered to get it renewed. Last but not the least, there was a high risk situation because sometimes there was no exit route. We know that all buildings have a fire exit, but these small setups never bothered to have a separate fire exit either. There was no first aid, no basic medical aid kit available in such factories which are doing such a high risk occupation. Imagine. Now, apart from that, there was hardly any systematic training given to the workers. The most unfortunate thing is that many of the laborers in such industries are either women, rural women, who have migrated to the urban area because of pull factors in the cities, better job, better lifestyle, and so on. Many of them are children, sometimes even younger than 14 years. So, anyway, India's labor laws prohibit children under 14 being employed in any factory, specifically dangerous occupations, but still rampant. It's very common that young children are working here, and they are the ones who suffer from these fatalities. Unfortunately, also, the workers who are employed here are migrant laborers. They keep migrating from one state to another to find work in factories. They do not sometimes know English language, or they do not know the language of the state in which they are migrating to work. What's the result of that? They sign up the forms, whichever is given to them. It is just a paperwork, and they do not even understand the language. So, after the investigation was done in these factories, it was found out that all the employees had signed. They had ticked those forms which spoke about fire safety protocols, when in reality there was no protocol happening because these workers are illiterate. They are not even familiar with the language of another state or English. So, how do you expect them to sign safety forms or give self declaration? This is an abuse. Similarly, as I said, there was no kind of auditing done, there was no monitoring done, and the people who are responsible for such accidents, the owners of such factories who are living on profits, they were hardly ever convicted. They were hardly ever given the right, deserved imprisonment or fine. And hence, all these avoidable accidents are a huge reality of Indian informal economy today. That's what this article speaks about. So, therefore, talking about all these problems, in reality, does India have any framework today? Any labor law today which ensures and takes care of the labor welfare, basic protocols of manufacturing and service sector industries. So presently, India operates with a limited set of laws. Unfortunately, most of them are very outdated now. Say, for example, we can talk about the Factories Act, which prohibits children under 14 from working in hazardous industries or any kind of factories. But it is a colonial law. Unfortunately, it's very, very old now. It does not take care of the modern day economic needs. Second, we have the Explosives Act. Okay, so Explosive Act also takes care of industries like minings, brick making, or bangle making, which use, or firecracker making, which consistently use dangerous materials and ingredients for manufacturing. So again, this act is an important one, but this is even older. This is 1884. Then we can talk about Environmental Protection Act. This is 1986, way before the liberalization era started. And ultimately, we have the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code. So, this is Occupational Safety and Working Condition Code, and this is 2020. Now, this Occupation Safety and Working Condition Code is a very important component of Oh, yeah, okay. That was a very interesting comment. I will read it out. So, this happens to be a very interesting part of the Social Security Code. Okay. You may have heard that back in 2020, the Indian government legislated the Social Security Code. The purpose was to mix the previously existing 13 labor laws into one segment. So, existing 13 labor laws, because they were old and outdated, were all mixed up together and they were incorporated as the modern Social Security Code. The first such code in India, which also includes workers of the GIG segment and the platform workers, informal employees also. It includes in the government's welfare policies. It tries to extend social security, fixed wage, and good working conditions, plus pension benefits to all the informal sector workers, but it's still on paper. It has not happened in reality. Okay, so all these codes are presently existing in India, but the Social Security Code 2020 is yet to be properly implemented right now. So, for that matter, the government has also created the e-Shram portal, a very famous online portal in which all the informal sector workers, including migrant workers, can update their names. And accordingly, the government can include them in the social welfare policy. But again, the problem is most of these people are digitally illiterate and they have no awareness of such schemes. And hence, these accidents keep taking place every now and then. Okay. So, a very valid comment made there by Vansh that long, long back, it was actually Karl Marx in his analysis of capitalism, in his critique of capitalism, where he had mentioned about how the laborers actually are exploited in the industrial capitalistic system. Yes, so whenever we talk about reforming the labor laws, whenever we analyze the problems faced by the informal sector employees, yes, you could say it sounds like a very Marxian perspective. I would say a neo Marxian perspective rather, but that's, yes, that's a valid observation. Okay, so now once we are done with these two basic articles, let me just take another little amount of your time and make you walk through the prelims article. As I said, the prelims articles are shorter, but they just focus on the daily news current events. So we can just pick up points from there in our answer writing. Okay, sometimes direct questions in the prelims are also based on such short, crisp articles. For example, this one on page number 10 talks about how Indian Prime Minister Shri Modi will be visiting China after a gap of 7 years. So once again, India-China bilateral diplomacy is going to be renewed after a long gap. In between, there was COVID-19 pandemic. There was a mistrust that happened between both the countries. There was huge conflict regarding the line of actual control between both the countries once more. Okay, recently we saw how China removed so many hundreds of its workers from India and called them back to China. Obviously, both the countries are busy fighting a war. a war of trade, a war regarding the line of control. Yes, of course, an ideological battle. India is, in principle, against China's monopoly in the South China Sea region. Yes, India has been a key supporter of countries like South Korea and Japan. All of them are threatened by China's presence in that region. Similarly, China constantly gives us supply shocks, not only of rare earth materials, but also of AI chips, semiconductor materials. All of that is important to our economy. We know that. Not only the solar cells, electronic vehicles, but also so many other kind of productions and manufacturings of semiconductors. So I know situation is not wonderful and smooth between the countries, but this is looking very interesting because after 7 years, a visit is coming. Last happened in say 2018 when Prime Minister had visited again for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, and now after 7 years we see something similar happening. So what are the developments? What is the expectation? Now, interesting thing is that this visit will highlight two key agendas on India's part. One, in today's time of trade war, tariff conflict, ideological battle between countries over the Israel US group on the one hand, the Russia China League on another. India has, anyways, found it very challenging to maintain a strictly multilateral position. That India has neither completely supported the Israel US group when it comes to attack on Iran. Remember how India was continuing its support to Iran because Iran also has supported India in the past when it came to the Pahalgam terror violence. Also, Iran, India have had historical ties, cultural ties, trade ties. So therefore, India could not take a strong position on Israeli attack on Iran. So India had not supported them. Similarly, when we talk about the Russia-Ukraine issue, we all know that India has not very vocally criticized Russia on international forum. Again, because we have a huge trade and defense ties with Russia. But at the same time, India has sent a lot of relief and support and welfare material to Ukraine and the war hit victims. So, in that case, it has been challenging. But as our foreign secretary recently said, that gone are the days of the Nehruvian times when India was only non-aligned in the sense that India chose to do nothing and say nothing about any other country. It was just very closed. But today it's not like that. The foreign secretary was very clear when he said that India will take a decision today which suits its own diplomatic geopolitical necessities. Okay, so in this context, this visit to China becomes important because this further endorses India's strong multilateral agenda. Okay, so multilateral ideology and multilateral stand of India further gets a boost with this visit because it means India will coordinate with China better now on issues such as the Afghanistan situation. Similarly, on instability that's happening in the world oil prices. Similarly, on terrorism, the border terrorism. Plus, India will also talk about massive drug trafficking that's ongoing. Besides that, the situation in Myanmar. So, all these will be the dominating agendas in the visit, which means India is also taking quite seriously its Look East agenda. We are focusing on the South Asia region quite well. So, this is something that the visit highlights. Another important thing is that it means that while US and US tariff domination is ongoing right now, Russia China led groupings, such as the SCO in picture right now, is also something that India is ready to give focus upon. So, India is having an active engagement with the other countries as well. So, it just clearly shows that this visit will mean another kind of solidarity, some more friendship, and this will lead to perhaps better coordination, better trade productivity at a time when India is already scared of the US tariff domination. So that's the key coverage of this article. Now, exactly what happens in the summit, we are yet to see, and it is going to happen really soon because it starts from August end and goes up to September first week. So we will keep following up this development and see what important points we can gather from here. Now, as I said, apart from all these agendas, there is one more thing. India will also explore talks with China regarding energy security, regarding the rare earth materials supply chain stability, and the North-South Transport Corridor, as well as the Chabahar Port. These two will also be dominating the agenda. We will take this up in detail once the summit actually starts. And then the article says that despite this huge promise of renewed relationship, there are some dangers that are like a shadow on this meeting. One, of course, is the poor background of the India-China relations, talking about the line of control tensions. It's difficult to find a bilateral solution when there is a political conflict that's ongoing. Similarly, the Russia China influence is very, very clear on Shanghai Cooperation Organization and its agenda. So sometimes this could also overshadow India's own interest. Last but not the least, there are a lot of people who are critical of this meet between Indian Prime Minister and Chinese leadership. They say that China is one such neighbor on whom India cannot easily trust. Now, doesn't this look like a repetition of the history? Remember the India China war, where the Nehru government was blamed for having overlooked the danger of Chinese aggression because India was busy signing the Panchsheel agreement, and just after that, China chose to attack us. So sometimes it looks like history works in cycles. And today the critics are so worried, they say that if there is no proper border or line of control solution, then any such summit will anyways not help us much. So we are yet to see whether it is actually productive or it is just paperwork that it comes out to be. Okay, thank you so much for your warm wishes. A very happy Raksha Bandhan to you as well, Raj, and to everyone who's here. Okay, the next article is page number 10. This is actually a positive news. It talks about a step that the Indian government has taken today to support India's poor and vulnerable segments. So I could say that this is GS paper 2, once again, social justice, fuel security, and some kind of stability of clean energy to be supplied to the Indian population living below the poverty line. So yes, this is social justice. Of course, we are talking about GS3 economy, because under economy, there is this topic of economic subsidies. So we are covering subsidy here, okay? These are the two things. And let's see what the article says. The article says that the union government has now approved a massive budget, about rupees 30,000 crore. For what? To companies like the Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited, the Hindustan Petroleum Corporation Limited, and the Indian Oil Limited Corporation Limited. Why? Just to subsidize, to reduce the price of LPG, the domestic cooking fuel, to reduce that. The government has decided to give all these companies a major subsidy. Now, what is a subsidy, by the way? It's a very often, very commonly used word in economic discourse, but few people understand that. So subsidy is different from a direct cash transfer. See, whenever you talk about any social welfare scheme in GS paper 2, we should be very clear that government can help the poor and the needy people in various kind of ways. For example, when we talk about government choosing to directly send money to the bank account of the beneficiaries, we call them as the direct benefit transfer schemes, the DBT schemes. These are purely financial in nature. But sometimes the government chooses to give subsidy in the form of minimum support price. Minimum support price means the government agrees that I will purchase your products at a fixed price always, no matter what the market situation is. The government often gives these kind of MSPs to farmers, to tribal people for tribal products. The purpose is to assure them a fixed income despite market ups and downs, because market is very volatile. Okay. So this is known as MSP. Usually the price that the government fixes is always above the market rate. So anyway, the recipient will get some benefit, plus it will make sure that the beneficiaries continue to do the business that they are in. So it's a wonderful way of financial support. Now, when we talk about the sugarcane industry, there is yet another concept called fair and remunerative price. Okay, so there the government gives FRPs. So there are various kind of welfare measures which exist. If you like, I can make a separate session on just the nature of social welfare policies, but do let me know in case you look forward to that, so I can come back with that for you. Coming back to the article, Okay, Mamta, if PDF is the concern, let me just fix it today. Okay, I will make sure it is provided to everyone. Okay. Now, talking back about the article, the government has chosen to give some kind of subsidized, which means at a fixed price, the government will give help to all these companies who are engaged in oil and energy sector. What's the purpose? The purpose is to make sure that during a time when global oil prices are rising too much, it is the consumers in India, especially the poor ones, the ones who are below poverty line, those are the ones who will be the sufferers. Because if the global prices increase too much, then the domestic fuel price will also rise. So ultimately, who will face the burden? The buyers, the consumers. And hence, the government has decided that despite the high global oil prices, the Indian domestic fuel prices should not get impacted and the consumers should get an affordable rate when it comes to LPG. See, the bigger agenda is to make sure that the poor population gets clean energy. So, do you know that unfortunately, there are about more than 50% people in rural India who still actually use coal, charcoal, and wood as their cooking mediums. It also is associated with a very high incidence of lung diseases among these people, premature death among women and children. It's very high. And the number is not changing either. For over 10 years, it is a static figure. Lots and lots of rural people use that. The real problem is lack of access to LPG, lack of access to natural gas and electricity based energy. So here comes in picture a very interesting scheme made by the government of India called the PMUY, the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana. Ujjwala as a word means to illuminate something, to give light to something. Here under the Ujjwala Yojana, we are talking about providing continuous, cheap, affordable supply of LPG gas connections to people under the below poverty line segment. This not only includes the free installation, the free gas pipeline, but also necessary papers, documentation, all of that should be provided to the poor people. The scheme was launched in 2016, a very important component of GS paper to social justice. Okay. Now, please also understand that there is a very interesting concept. If you have not heard, then you should know because it's crucial for the perspective of GS paper 3, poverty. Now, from 2021 onwards, the Niti Aayog in India creates a very unique index to measure how many people in India are poor. This is known as the Multi-Dimensional Poverty Index, the MDPI. Do you know that it is based on 12 indicators, on 12 factors? It's a very comprehensive measure because now we believe that poverty is not just about having less income or no money. That's only economic poverty or income poverty. Today we say poverty is about deprivation. So MDPI uses 12 factors to measure who is the real poor. Among the other factors like sanitation, access to bank account, concrete housing, sanitation, safe drinking water, primary health and education, one such happens to be access to clean energy. Whether you have access to clean, non-polluting, non-solid sources of energy for cooking and domestic use. So therefore today clean energy is the top priority of the government when it comes to welfare of the people below poverty line. And hence the target beneficiaries of the Ujjwal scheme were about 10 crore. Ultimately, it leads to health improvement, combating environmental pollution, and then women health and well-being. Okay, so very important here. So do remember that this development of government trying to support towards a cleaner energy resonates with the PM Ujjwal scheme. Now, kindly do not get confused between the Ujjwal scheme and the Ujjwala scheme. There is a difference. While one talks about providing clean energy in form of LPG to the people of BPL, below poverty line, there's another scheme called Ujjwala. That is about rehabilitating and protecting the victims of sex trafficking in India, of human trafficking in India. So that's very different. So no confusion here. You should know exactly the difference between both the schemes. And now let's proceed with our last article perhaps. And this is again very interesting I would say again social justice. A lot of articles today from GS paper 2, okay? Of course, this is GS paper 1 and 2 both. Why? Because it talks about social justice and it's a social, very important social issue. So this article focuses on educational reforms. After the new education policy 2020 has been rolled out, educational reforms, especially in higher education, have become one of our key agendas. Because NEP 2020 talks about vocational education. It talks about creating better technological digital education so that Indian youth are having better chances of getting employment not only in India but in the global market. So this article from page 11 talks about how the government has started a very very interesting scheme. What is the scheme? The scheme is referred to as multidisciplinary education and research improvement in technical education merit e scheme. Under this, 275 plus institutions will be created, including for engineering education and other polytechnical colleges, which offer multiple courses to children in the science and technology domain. Huge assistance, huge help we have received from the World Bank. What shall be the purpose? The purpose is to improve the quality of technical education, again in line with the NEP 2020, allow computerization in classrooms, including women, tribal youth, people from the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and OBC backgrounds in the technical fields. Apart from that, much better accreditation programs. Let colleges be associated with good, recognized universities under the University Grants Commission. Foreign collaboration for online education and integrating social science courses with management courses, technical courses with again some kind of digital courses so that children come out of the colleges with much better employability rate. They can get better jobs in the formal sector. That's the purpose here. So this is quite agreeing to the national education policy principle that education should be multidisciplinary, which means across many subjects and in such a way that it helps you get a job. So that's a short coverage. And now to the last article for the day before we finish. It is in line with the GS paper 2 constitutional provisions, freedom of speech, judicial review, and GS paper 1 old historical laws in India from the British period which need to be changed now. Okay, so this talks about the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. You know that in 2023, the Indian government decided that it will replace three colonial period old laws called as the Indian Penal Code of 1860. This was replaced by three very revolutionary and modern day legal clauses, which together is known as the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. But what has happened is that recently somebody has raised an objection. There was a PIL, a public interest litigation, done which blamed that the modern Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, the reinterpretation of the old Indian Penal Code, also has not changed anything much. Its nature happens to be as regressive, as backward, and as you can say unconstitutional and non-democratic as the earlier IPC. Why has such a blame come suddenly? The blame has come specifically regarding section 152 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita of 2023. The allegation says that during the colonial period, do you remember the Jallianwala Bagh tragedy? Do you remember how the British government had created strict sedition laws? Sedition means if anything was said against the government without even investigation would simply go and arrest the people whom it thought were anti-government, anti-British, and they would just put them in the jail. There was no transparency in that. Today, somebody has said that the modern Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita of India is not doing anything much to change the earlier section 124A of the IPC of 1860. That was also very, very strict when it comes to talking about sedition or anti-government agenda. And the new one is also extremely strict and narrow-minded when it comes to the anti-government agenda. Nothing has changed. Why? Because it says that under the British Raj, Section 124A of the IPC, the old penal code, Indian Penal Code, which was created by the British government during 1860 and 1870, it said that any single word of criticism against the government, anything that you try to contest or criticize on the part of the government, government policy, government legislation, government statement, that would land you up in the jail, or you will have to be, legally prosecuted for that. But that's very anti-constitutional, because we know that there is something called Article 21, Article 22, right to life and liberty, the right to seek fair justice. Okay, then you have the right to free speech and expression, Article 19, right to equality, Article 14. Despite all these constitutional provisions of fundamental rights, which give Indian citizens the right to express themselves freely, the right to media, to highlight issues which it considers as being in the welfare of the people, even if it includes criticizing the government somewhere within decent limits of national security and morality, it's okay, it's fine. That is democracy all about. But the Bharati Nyaya Sanhita has not done much to change the British Times very, very narrow-minded, conservative and strict sedition law. Because today, as per this article, the Bharati Nyaya Sanhita, which as I said came into creation back in 2023 by now replacing the older acts of Indian Penal Code, which we just discussed, of 1860, with three new laws. One happens to be the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, the BNS itself. Then you have the Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita. Okay, so this is Bharatiya Nyaya Suraksha Sanhita. This is the second one. And the third one happens to be Bharatiya Saksha Adhiniyam. All these have now completely replaced the earlier existing Criminal Procedure, CRPC, the Criminal Procedure Code of 1973. Okay, 1973. Plus, it has replaced the Indian Evidence Act of 1872. This is a modern interpretation of law. So why does this modern interpretation still have Section 152, which says a slightest criticism of the government can take you to the jail? No government criticism is allowed. No freedom of speech and expression, whether it's social media, whether it's mainstream media, whether it's your individual challenging any policy, any decision of the government. So it means nothing much has changed. This is the article's plea. The article also says, today the Indian Constitution gives you Article 14, right to equality to all citizens of India. Article 19(1)(a), the most important, right to free speech and expression beyond, under certain morality and safety limits, you have a right to express yourself. Similarly, Article 21, as I said, the heart and the core of fundamental rights, right to life, right to personal liberty, the right to actually do what you like, say what you like if you are not harming anybody. Ultimately, the article questions that the spirit of calling government criticism as criminal means that we are still stuck up in the colonial times, where the British government used to single-handedly go and catch anybody who used to criticize that. This is extremely faulty. This is extremely undemocratic, unconstitutional. With this plea, the article ends, and so does our session for the day. So now, before I take your leave, I'm leaving you with an interesting mains question. It's a UPSC question. See, introspect that after taking this session of today, can you try to frame an answer to this question in the form of introduction, a body of the answer, and a short conclusion? Remembering that introduction begins with defining the important keywords of the question. The body talks about the exact query that the question has asked. Discuss what? The fact that occupational safety, employment, job safety in India is not a privilege, but a fundamental right. By giving your employee, by giving a worker job safety, you are not doing any favor to that worker. It's a fundamental right of that worker to work in a safe, dignified environment. In the light of recent industrial accidents, so many accidents are happening recently in factories and industries. Recently, one happened in Tamil Nadu as well. Examine India's legal and institutional preparedness. Is India prepared to deal with such accidents legally? Can some justice be done? Institutional. Do we have any bodies, organizations which take care of such accidents and ensures that they do not happen again in future? That's the question. See if you can solve it. I'll be happy if you can post your comments, or you can also discuss with me in the live chat. Okay, so now I shall take your leave for today's lecture. I absolutely got your point on the PDF, and thank you so much for Pankaj for your kind words. I do hope you enjoyed the lecture, and I'll see you once again on Monday with another interesting Hindu session. In the meantime, keep studying, keep enjoying what you study, ask questions, and please follow us. Follow us on StudyIQ English, like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much, and all the best.